Hello, and welcome back to the Great Aspirations ACT Prep series. In this video, I'm going to do a walkthrough for the first math practice section. And the way that I'm going to do that is that first I want to go through the strategy, how I would approach all of these questions, and then I'll go through them individually. And what that means is that I'm going to spend a few minutes discussing how I would approach this section if I were actually going to take it as a part of a test, and that I'm going to take these questions in the order that I would take them, not necessarily in the order that they're presented in the packet. So without further ado, let's get into the strategy of this packet. So you'll notice with most of these math sections that the questions are organized more or less in order of difficulty. So the first question that we have is easy. It's triangle, angles just adding up and figuring out which angle adds to 180, or some slight twist on that. We have some basic algebra, we have some basic fractions, arithmetic, this sort of thing. Again, easy geometry, some easy functions, and things that are slightly more complicated. Occasionally, okay, so here is a trig problem, but not an extremely complicated one that doesn't require any math. Some easy pre-algebra type stuff early on. And then as we move on, just skimming quickly, we have some adding of square roots, which might be a little bit difficult if we don't remember exactly how to do it. We have some inequalities that might be slightly more complicated. But again, still simple enough stuff. Logarithms, which may be very difficult if you don't know how to do logarithms. And as we get closer toward the end, we have some bigger geometry problems that might be slightly more complicated, but still might not be all that involved. This one, question 38, immediately to me looks not difficult, but time-consuming. We can see, okay, we want to find some area of this and multiply it out, which is going to be, I think, quite frustrating, but still very, very doable. Again, longer word problems like these might take a little bit longer toward the end. Again, okay, some more difficult geometry problems. Geometry problems normally take a lot longer. So, and then we get into actual proper trig here with question 53, and we get into some more stuff that gets to be more difficult. And normally what we find all the way at the end is some more problem-solving type stuff that doesn't test your math skill as much as it tests your ability to solve problems and to imagine the way that these problems would be laid out. And to imagine complex solutions using simple tools that you already have, that you've already proven earlier on in the packet. Especially things like this one, question 58, looks very simple, but I think it's going to take a little bit of time to understand it. Likewise, question 57 seems like it could be very difficult if we tried to do this the wrong way, but might lead to a simple solution. You get a lot of those toward the end of the packet, toward the end of the math section of the test. And I think that's a good time to do them, is closer to the end, because they will take a lot of time. And they might just be impossible. The solution might just not come to you on the day. So I think I'm going to get into this. I'm going to do some of these easier geometry problems, especially, and sort of move through these in question order. And I'm going to skip some of those more complicated geometry and trig problems and do them at the end. Well, not quite at the end. I'll do them before the sort of problem-solving problems, the more complicated and involved problems, sort of questions 55 through 60, maybe. But anyway, I think I am ready to start on this. So question 1 asks, in the figure below, B is on line AC. Angle ACD measures 100 degrees. What is the measure of angle ABD? Okay, so ACD is 100 degrees, and angle BDC is 35 degrees. So what we need to figure out is this angle. And we know that this angle ABD plus DBC will be 180 degrees. So we need to find this angle, we need to find this angle and subtract this angle measure from 180, and we will find this angle measure ABD. So this angle is going to be 180 minus 100 plus 35 is 135, which is going to be 45 degrees. Yes, that's right. So 45. And then we just do the same thing. We say 180 minus 45 is going to be 135. So very simple mental math. You probably don't even really need to write it out, but you can solve it just like that. The answer choice is D, 135 degrees. For what value of A is the equation 1/3 A minus 6 equals 9 true? Okay, so this is pretty simple. 1/3 A minus 6 equals 9. 1/3 A minus 6 equals 9. So let's isolate A. And I apologize for my handwriting, but let's isolate A and we will figure out what this is. So we move the 6 over to the other side. So we say 1/3 A equals, we add 6 to both sides, so it equals 15. And then we divide by 1/3. Or in other words, we multiply by 3, right? So if we multiply by 3, we'll have 3 over 3A, which is the same as 1A, times 3 times, equals 3 times 15, excuse me. So A equals 45. So the value of A is 45. Answer choice A. What is the least common denominator of the fractions 1/12, 1/36, and 1/48? So obviously these are all multiples of 12, which is very nice. And that means that anything that is a common denominator of 1/36 or 1/48 is going to be a common denominator of 1/12. So that means we really just need to find the least common denominator of 1/36 and 1/48. And in a sense, this is the same thing as finding a least common denominator between 1/3 and 1/4, and then multiplying those by 12. Because this is 1/3 times 12 and 1/4 times 12, if that makes sense. And the least common denominator between 1/3 and 1/4 is going to be 1/12. So 1/12 times 12 is going to be 144. So that's a complicated explanation, but in essence, we say 1/36 and 1/48. And we know that these both equal 1/3 times 12 and 1/4 times 12. And when these denominators have common factors, like 12 in this case, we can cross them out as long as we add them back in later. So we can find the common denominator between 1/3 and 1/4. which is going to be 1/12. 1 over 12. So now we need to add this back in to 1 over 12. So we have 1 over 12 times 12, or 1 over 144. So there you go. There is our answer, 1 over 144. We can't just multiply everything out. That is where we get some of these answer choices, is just by multiplying 12 times 36 times 48. Okay, question 4 asks, the absolute value of 12 minus 4 minus the absolute value of 2 minus 6 equals what? So we can almost treat these absolute value signs like parentheses. The absolute value of 12 minus 4 is 8, and the absolute value of 2 minus 6 is 4. 2 minus 6 is negative 4, but the absolute value of that is 4. So 8 minus 4 is 4. Simple arithmetic. And I still am confident in our strategy here because these questions have been quite simple. This one might be more complicated. We might skip this. In the trapezoid below, line AB is parallel to line DC. What is the measure of angle C? So this is simple enough. This is purportedly about trapezoids, but it's actually about triangles. So I think I'm going to solve it. If we imagine this triangle here with BC, and maybe we'll make a new point and call this point E. If we imagine a new triangle here, we know that this angle, CBE, is going to be the difference between ABE and ABC. ABE is going to be 90 degrees because I made it that way. We made it that way. So this is going to be 15 degrees. Angle EBC is going to be 15 degrees. And this is 90 degrees, right? BEC is 90 degrees. So it's going to be 105 degrees for the other two angles aside from angle C in this triangle. So if we have 15 plus 90 plus angle C equals 180, then we know that angle C is going to equal 75, right? We take 90 out, so that's 90. We take 15 out, 75. So the angle is 75. You could also solve this by imagining that this trapezoid well, you can imagine that any parallelogram is going to have angles that add up to 360 degrees, right? So you could suppose that these two angles are also going to add up to 180. And by that I mean angles B and C. Likewise, angles A and D are going to add up to 180 degrees. So you could just say 180 minus 105 immediately if you know how to do that. If that's how you solve this problem, that's totally fine as well. This is just, I think, a little bit clearer of a way to solve this. Although it does take longer, I will admit. 6. Juan's job pays him $16 per hour up to 42 hours per week. Juan is paid 1.5 times as much for every hour he works over 42 hours. How much in dollars does Juan earn in a week in which he works 51 hours? Okay, so we know that the first 42 hours that Juan works, he's going to be paid $16 per hour. So the first 42 hours is going to be 42 times $16 The remaining hours out of 51, in other words, 9 hours, he's going to make 9 hours at a rate of 1.5 times 16. And now we just need to do some simple math, although this is a great time to use your calculator. 1.5 times 16 is 24 times 9, times 9. 42 times 16, if you can do that in your head, more power to you, but this is a great time to get out your calculators. 42 times 16 is 672. 672 plus 9 times 24. 9 times 24 is 216. 216. So we add them both together, and we end up with 888, which is answer choice A, 888. Olga's doctor recommended that she take 4 pills of her medication on her first day of treatment and 2 pills every subsequent day. If she follows this recommendation, how many pills will Olga have taken by the end of her 20-day treatment? So we can make a function for this if we really want to. And the function for that would be 2x plus 2, f of x equals 2x plus 2. And the way this works is that on the first day she takes, well, for every day she takes 2 pills. And on the first day she actually takes 2 extra pills. We could think of it as 4 pills, or we could think of it as 2 pills every day and 2 extra pills on the first day, which is where these 2 pills show up. So we could create a function like this. Or we could also think of it this way, 20 days, so it's 4 pills on the first day and 2 pills for the other 19 days. So we could say 4 plus 2 times 19. And these are going to lead us to the same answer. So 2x plus 2 is going to be 40. If we want to solve for f of 20, is going to equal 40 plus 2, or 42. Likewise, 2 times 19 is 38. 38 plus 4, and this is also going to equal 42. So either way you want to solve this is fine. I think finding a function for this is probably more time consuming. And again, this might be something that you're able to do in your head, so long as you don't forget about these 4 pills on the first day. Question 8 asks, what's the value of the expression 4 factorial over 2 factorial squared? So let's remember how we do factorials. Factorials, we multiply every number by, well, we multiply a number by every number between it and 0, every whole number, I should say. You don't multiply by 0 at the end, though. That's important. So this really is 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, all divided by 2 times 1 squared. So 4 times 3 is 12, times 2 is 24, times 1 is 24 still. So we have 24 over 2 times 1 squared is 2 squared, so that's over 4. So we know that this equals 6. Answer choice D is 6. For the right triangle illustrated below, what is the value of cosine B? So if you don't know trigonometry, you skip this one, obviously. It's just not going to be easy. But remember that we don't actually need to do any numbers here. There are no whole numbers expressed. There are no integers at all. So we can just use these variables. And if we remember our SOHCAHTOA, if you have taken pre-calculus or trigonometry, you will know your SOHCAHTOA. Cosine B is adjacent over hypotenuse. So cosine of B is going to be cosine B, therefore, is going to be little b, which is our adjacent, over a, which is our hypotenuse. Little b over a, which is answer choice A here. So if you know it, a very fast problem, definitely not one to skip on your first pass through. This one seems a little bit longer, but it's actually not so bad. 5a cubed plus 6ab plus 12b minus a cubed minus 2ab minus b is equivalent to. So we notice here we have a lot of like terms. So we can just count how many there are. So how many a cubed are there? 5 minus 1, so we have 4 a cubed. How many ab's? 6 minus negative 2, which is 8 ab's, so plus 8 ab, plus 12b minus b. 12b minus, excuse me, I made a mistake, and you need to make sure you don't make this mistake. 12b minus negative b, which is 13b plus 13b. So this can look intimidating, but it's just counting, which you can certainly do on your first pass through. So 4a cubed plus ab plus 13b. Answer choice A is the correct answer here. Which of the following xy pairs is the solution for the system of equations 2x plus 3y equals 5 and 4x plus y equals 10? And you can do a lot of algebra to figure these ones out, but what I find with systems of equations problems is that it's normally easier just to find the answer choice that has the most common x value and see if that works, and sort of plug and chug that way. So I notice here that 1 is common in answer choices B and E. So let's just try 1 for x, which would mean that y is 1. So 2 plus 3 would have to equal 5 for this one. But 4 plus 1 does not equal 10 for the second equation. So 1, 1 is out. 1, 6. Well, 1, 6 obviously doesn't work either, because that would be 2 plus 18 equals 5, and that's obviously not true. Likewise, 0. Let's try out 0 plus 10 over 3. Sorry, not plus 10 over 3. 0 and 10 over 3. So 0 plus 30 over 3 equals 5. Nope, absolutely not. 0 plus 30 over 3 equals 10. 2, 2, this one seems pretty promising. 2x plus 6y does not equal 5. Sorry, 2x is 4 plus 3 times 2 is 6. So 4 plus 6 equals 5. Absolutely not. So we end up with answer choice A. 2.5 times 2 is 5 plus 0 does equal 5. 2.5 times 4 equals 10 plus 0 still equals 10. So A is our correct answer. And doing this quickly in your head, if you're good at mental arithmetic, I find is a much faster and easier way to solve this kind of problem when it's multiple choice, as it is on the ACT. Frank's train was scheduled to leave the station at 5:43 p.m., but it was delayed 212 minutes. What time did Frank's train leave the station? So we want to be careful here. This is something that could easily trip us up if we make a stupid mistake, but also something that's very, very, very easy if we know how to do it, and if we make sure that we don't make any of those mistakes. So 212 minutes is an interesting way to express time. 212 minutes, off the top of my head, is 3 hours and something, right? So if we have 3 hours, which is 3 times 60, plus something equals 212, plus something, I'll leave a question mark there, equals 212. Take 180 out of it, 3 times 60. Then we have, oops, not 2, question mark, equals 212 minus 180 is going to be 32. So we have 3 hours and 32 minutes. So we need to add 543 and 332. So 43 and 32 leaves us with 75. 43 and 32, 75. In other words, 1 hour and 15. In other words, 1 hour and 15 plus 3 hours and 5 hours. In other words, 8 hours and 15. Oh, nope, excuse me. 8 hours. So this leaves us with 9:15. 9:15. So 5:43 p.m., 212 minutes later is 9:15 p.m. Okay, question 13 looks very complicated because we're supposed to graph things in our heads, except it isn't really if we know what is going on with graphs. Question 13 looks like it has potential to be complicated because on first impression, you might think, my gosh, how am I going to graph this circle in my head? But it's really simple if you really look at it. And you don't even really need to understand how to graph a circle. You should know how to graph a circle, but you don't need to. Because a circle with the equation x squared plus y squared equals 81, graphed on a coordinate plane, where does it intersect with the y-axis? Well, you know that whenever something is intersecting with the y-axis, x equals 0. X equals 0. So what we're actually doing is we're solving y squared equals 81. We can ignore x squared because x equals 0. And this is the same as solving the square root of 81. So y is going to equal plus or minus 9. Simple enough. Simple enough. So we're going to end up with the points 0 always, 9, and 0, negative 9. Simple enough. Simple enough. 0, 9, and 0, negative 9. So that is answer choice A. So this is one of these questions that could take a lot of time if you went through and you tried to graph a circle and tried to point it out. But it's really very simple if you think about what is going on with the point where the circle intersects the y-axis, what it means to intersect the y-axis. Question 14 asks, given that x squared minus 3x minus 10 factors into two binomial factors with integer coefficients, which of the following binomials is one of those factors? X squared minus 3x minus 10. And this is something, again, binomial factoring, something you should have practiced in any math class. But let's think about what we're going to end up with. We have negative 10, the factors of which are going to add up to negative 3. The factors of negative 10 are going to add up to negative 3x. And if we think about the factors of 10, we have 10, obviously. We have 5 times 2, and that's it. Factors of 10 are not very difficult to find out. So if those are our factors, 5 and 2, or 10 and 1, then we don't need to do very much. If we think about, obviously there's no way to add up 10, 1, negative 1, and negative 10 to add up to 3. So we're really looking at 5 times negative 2, or negative 5 times 2 in terms of this, in terms of these constants that we're adding to the end of these binomials. So 5 times negative 2 or negative 5 times 2. Which one is it? Well, we end up with negative 3. We end up with negative 3, and we know that the factors of negative 10 need to add up to negative 3, need to add up to the coefficient of the x term. So we know that we need to end up with this one, negative 5 times 2. Okay, so if we end up with negative 5 times 2, then we have x minus 5, x plus 2. Simple enough. Let's just make sure. We'll FOIL this out. First, x squared, outer, plus 2x, inner, minus 5x, last, minus 10, 2x minus, so we have x squared, 2x minus 5x is minus 3x, 9 minus 10 leaves us with minus 10. So, yes, we end up with the right thing. So we have x minus 5 and x plus 2, and here it is, x minus 5. You don't need to go through all of this. You can really just get to this step if it suits you, because at this step you know that one of our factors is x minus 5. This part is just proving to you that we definitely got this all right and double checking our work. But on the actual test, what I would do is I would get to this point, think about the factors of 10 and, the factors of negative 10, and think about how the factors of negative 10 could arrange to come up with negative 3, how we could add the factors of negative 10 to get to negative 3, and I would realize that one of these has to be negative 5, and if x plus 2 is nowhere on this answer sheet, which it is not, then we can know that it's definitely x minus 5. On the actual test, I would not FOIL this out. I would not come up with all the factors. I would just look for x minus 5 or x plus 2 here. Okay, question 15 asks, a square and a rectangle have the same area. The length of the rectangle is 169 centimeters, and the width of the rectangle is 4 centimeters. What is the length in centimeters of a side of the square? So a square and a rectangle have the same area, and the length of the rectangle is this. So we know that the area of the square and the rectangle, the area is going to equal 169 times 4. 169 times 4. Which we all need to get our calculators out for this one, unless we know our 169 times tables by heart, but I certainly didn't. So our area is going to equal 676. And so we know that the length of a side of a square, is going to be the square root of the area. Right, we know that the length of the side of the square is the square root of the area. So, in other words, the length is going to be the square root of 676. 676, and if we break out our calculators, we realize that this is going to be 26. So the answer choice is B. Question 16 asks, consider two vectors, a, 2, 2, and b, minus 2, 2. A plus b equals what? Now, if you don't know how to deal with vectors, this one's going to be tough. But the simple solution to this is that you can actually just add up the coordinates. This is a lot of fancy notation for something that becomes very complicated later on down the line, especially in college. But really, at this level, adding vectors is very simple. We can say 2 plus minus 2 is going to equal 0, and 2 plus 2 is going to equal 4. Simple enough. Our answer choice is D. And if you really want to visualize this, if you're one of these people, if you need to visualize the way that this works, we would have a graph of some vectors. So we'd have a, 2, 2, which looks like this, and b minus 2, 2, which would look like that. Minus 2, 2, and 2, 2. And if we add them together, we end up with a new vector which is going to trace this line up to a height of 4 and be like that. So it's fairly intuitive if you know how to graph something, if you know how vectors work. If you don't know how vectors work, don't beat yourself up about it. Simple enough though. Add the x coordinates and add the y coordinates, the x values and the y values, and we end up with answer choice D. This looks like a long question. I'm going to skip it. Likewise with question 18. This is just a lot of writing and I'm going to skip it. 19 asks, a grocery store gives special rewards to a random group of 60 customers. On a random day 1 month later, out of a total of 120 customers, 12 customers had received the special rewards. Let P be the proportion of customers who received special rewards. What is P? The sample proportion for this sample. This is an error. Your packet won't have this. This is a question about figuring out what is important. Which part of the word problem is relevant? And we need to know if it's 60, we need to know if it's 120, we need to know if it's 12. And the thing is, this random group of 60 customers, we don't actually learn anything about it. And the fact that a random day 1 month later, we also don't learn anything about that random day. What we do know is that out of 120 customers, 12 received special rewards. So we know that 12 out of 120 received special rewards. So the proportion of customers who received special rewards are 12 out of 120, or 1 over 10. If we simplify, we divide the numerator and denominator by 10. So this whole sentence is not relevant. This part up to here, to this part, 1 month later, none of that is relevant at all. All we need to know is 12 out of 120. The sample proportion, therefore, is 1 out of 10, or answer choice B. So this could have been a really daunting question for a lot of you if you don't know what a sample proportion is and if you don't know what part of this is important. Because this question throws a lot of junk at you. Basically, there's a lot of stuff here that won't be relevant to answering the question. But I think if you're really going to tackle this type of question, what you need to say is, okay, when does this 60 come into play? What do I do with this 60? Okay, I don't know what to do with this 60. I know that 12 out of 120 received special rewards on this day, and I have no idea what's happening on this day. But when we say let P be the proportion of customers who receive special rewards, the sample, this sample that we're talking about here, is 12 out of 120. The question asks, this sample, 12 out of 120. So we know that it's answer choice B, 110, because it asks this sample, again, 12 out of 120. So we know we don't know what to do with 60, and the question doesn't ask about it, so this is total junk. But if you get caught up in, I don't know what to do with 60 customers, this is going to take a really long time to figure out. Okay, we have some fun addition to do here. Square root of 3 plus the square root of 12 plus the square root of 75 equals what? And so this is a case of knowing how to factor square roots. So we realize that the square root of 3 will not be factored because the square root of 3 is an irrational number. 3 is a prime number. We can't factor this. Plus the square root of 12. We can factor 12. We can factor 12 many different ways. And when we're adding square roots, when we're adding irrational numbers in units, we want to see if we can factor them so that they can be the same. In other words, in this example, we have the square root of 4 times 3, which is very convenient because 4 is a perfect square, plus 75. How can we factor 75? Let's think about it. Can we factor 75 into something and 3? And we can. 25 and 3 are both factors of 75. So now we have everything expressed in terms of the square root of 3. We can simplify this out. We can say the square root of 3 plus 2 times the square root of 3 plus 25 is the square root of 25 is 5. We multiply that by the square root of 3. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times the square root of 3. So our answer choice is E, 8 times the square root of 3. Question 21 asks, which of the following inequalities is equivalent to 5 minus x is greater than 2 minus x? And you might think of this as a inequalities problem at first, but that is really tricky. You always need to make sure when we have this answer choice cannot be solved from the given information. You always need to make sure that you are paying attention to whether this question is solvable. Which of the following inequalities is equivalent to 5 minus x is greater than 2 minus x? Well, this is kind of a nonsense statement, if you really think about it. If x is always the same, then 5 minus x is always going to be greater than 2 minus x, right? And we're not going to be able to sort much out from this because 5 minus x is going to be trivially larger than 2 minus x. So it's not true that x will always be greater than 2 over 5, because x could be something else. X could be literally anything, right? This is always going to be true for all values of x. This is always going to be true for all values of x. That's the important takeaway here. If x is 0, 5 is bigger than 2. If x is 10, 15 is bigger. If x is 10, negative 5 is greater than negative 8. It doesn't matter what value of x we have. This is trivially true because 5 is greater than 2. So we can immediately eliminate all of these. These are all saying that x has to be something or something else, but it's always, always true for every value of x. So E must be our correct answer. 22 asks, let A be negative and B be positive. If it can be determined in which quadrant of the standard xy coordinate plane is a b squared located. Question 22 asks, let A be negative and B be positive. If it can be determined in which quadrant of the standard xy coordinate plane is the point a, b squared located. So if we remember where our quadrants are, just quickly, we have 1, we have 2, we have 3, and we have 4. If a is negative, then we're over here. We're over here in quadrant 3 or quadrant 4. And b squared, well, b is positive, so b squared is also positive. So we're on the top half. We're in positive for the y value as well. So we know that we're in quadrant 4 because a is negative and b squared is positive. So we know we are in quadrant 4. This is a time when we don't need to be careful about cannot be determined from the given information. Question 23 asks, an ant colony's population grows exponentially, doubling every 12 days. What was the population of the colony exactly 12 weeks after the population was 1,000? So we can figure this out because we know that it doubles every 12 days. So 12 weeks means that it has doubled 7 times, right? Because a week is 7 days, and if it doubles every 12 days, we have 12 days times 7 days, but divided by 12 days gives us 7 times that it has doubled. So we can express that as 2 to the 7th power times the initial population of 1,000. 2 to the 7th power times 1,000. Seems pretty simple. If we know 2 to the 7th is 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128 is 2 to the 7th power times 1,000, which is 128,000. So that is answer choice C. Be super careful about this. Be super careful. Some people might interpret this as saying that the ant colony grows by 1,000 every 12 days, and they might answer choice A. And this is just not what it's saying. It's saying that it's growing exponentially and it doubles every 12 days. So the population is 1,000, and in 12 days it'll be 2,000. 12 more days, it won't be 3,000, it'll be double of 2,000, so it'll be 4,000. 12 more days, it'll be double of 4,000, it'll be 8,000. So it grows exponentially. And this is sort of something we can do, is we can say, okay, what is the rate of growth? It doubles it doubles 7 times, then we can say 2 to the 7th. And think about what this means. 2 to the 7th is the same as writing out 2 times 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 1,000. Think about what this is saying. It's saying 1,000 doubled, all of that doubled again, all of that doubled again, all of that doubled again, 7 times. So we're saying the population doubled 7 times, and it started at 1,000. So the population is now 128,000, 12 weeks after it was 1,000. Question 24 asks, a baker randomly selects 1 muffin flavor out of 8, and then randomly selects 1 muffin from a batch of a dozen, 12 muffins. What is the probability that the selected flavor will be blueberry and the selected muffin will be the 7th of the dozen? So we know that it's 1 flavor out of 8, which is blueberry, and 1 muffin out of the dozen, so the 7th out of 12. One muffin out of the dozen. Remember your simple probabilities. How many outcomes is this? Well, this is one particular muffin out of a dozen and out of 8 flavors. So one particular muffin out of 96 total muffins. Right, one particular muffin out of 96 muffins. So the answer choice must be 1/96. 1/96. Question 25 asks, the average height of Amy, Bagarka, and Away is exactly 165 centimeters. The average height of Amy, Bagarka, Away, and Ndidi is exactly 160 centimeters. How tall in centimeters is Ndidi? Okay. So we know that if the average height of Amy, Bagarka, and Away is 165 centimeters, then the total height of Amy, Bagarka, and Away is 165 times 3. In other words, Amy and Bagarka and Away are total 495 centimeters if you laid them all end to end. So what we also know, so this means we also know that Amy, Bagarka, Way, and Ndidi all divided by 4 is going to equal 160. But we know that we can substitute 495 for this quantity. In other words, 495 plus Ndidi over 4 equals 160. Or we can multiply this out. We can say 495 plus Ndidi is equal to 640. 640. Which means Ndidi is going to be 640 minus 495. 640 minus 495, which is 145 centimeters. So the answer choice is A. Intuitively, you might have said, look, she lowers the difference by, she lowers the average by 5 centimeters. And if we divide that average over 4 people, a 5 centimeter difference split among 4 people means that she's 20 centimeters shorter than the old average. So you might have just said 165 minus 20 is 145. And that's also a fair way to do it. It's a little bit less proper than what I did just here, but it's much, much faster. And if you can do that sort of thing intuitively, then that is what I recommend because it is so much faster. Question 26 asks, what is the value of the expression log base 2 of 4 times log base 3 of 27? And this can seem daunting, but if we think about what a logarithm is supposed to do, we're asking, what exponent do I need to raise this low number to get this high number? In other words, 2 to the what equals 4. 2 to the what equals 4. And this means that 2 to the what equals 4? Well, 2 to the 2 equals 4. So we have 2. Let me write that sort of decently. 2. And 3 to the what equals 27? Well, 3 cubed is 27. 3 cubed is 27. So 3 to the third power is 27, is the value of this logarithm. So this is just 2 times 3, which is 6. A pair of 12-sided dice with different numbers, 1 through 12, printed on each face of each die is rolled. Consider the sample space determined by rolling these dice and adding the 2 integers on the faces that land on top. What is the positive difference between the greatest sum and the least sum in this sample space? Well, if we think about the total sample space, the lowest possible we can get with these 12-sided dice, the lowest possible is 1 and 1. In other words, we could call that 1 plus 1 because we're adding numbers on each face. And the highest number we can get is 12 plus 12. Highest number is 12 plus 12. Which means that the difference, the positive difference between the greatest and the least sum is going to be 24 minus 2, or 22. 22. That's our answer choice. And we want to be careful we're not answering 143 because we're not multiplying. We're taking the sum. What angle measure in radians is equal to 90 degrees? What angle measure in radians is equal to 90 degrees? If you don't know radians, skip straight past. But for those of you that do, you know that a circle is 2 pi radians. A circle is 2 pi radians, which means that half of a circle is 1 pi, and another half of that is half of pi, or pi over 2. Pi over 2. So there's our answer. For one working week, Mike recorded the following temperatures in degrees Celsius so he could investigate the difference between high and low temperature each day. To the nearest degree, what was the mean of the positive difference in the daily high and low temperatures for these 5 days? This is a long one. I'm going to skip it and come back later. A student's budget is expressed as the fraction of their income in the chart provided. A student's budget is expressed as the fraction of their income in the chart provided. What is the fractional part of their income left for unbudgeted expenses? Right, okay. So if we think about this, we just need to add up all of these and find the difference between that and 1. And we notice that we have 1/32 is our smallest unit. So I think we should express everything in terms of 30 seconds. In other words, we have 1/32, we have 16 30 seconds, we have 2 30 seconds, we have 4 30 seconds, and we have 16. Oh, excuse me. And we have 8 30 seconds. 8 30 seconds. So we add all of these up. 2 plus 4 plus 8 equals 14. Plus 16 is 30. Plus 1 is 31. So we have 31 30 seconds already accounted for, which only leaves one 30-second left over. What fractional part of is left for unbudgeted expenses? It's 1/32. There's no way we're getting to 64ths. Notice if we only come down to 30 seconds here, so we can immediately eliminate A and use the math to get to these. Likewise with 48ths. There's no way to end up with 48ths after all of this. What is the 203rd digit after the decimal point in the repeating decimal 0.1237 repeating. Okay. So this is somewhat stressful if you don't know how to do this, but you just need to realize that this is 4 digits that are repeating. So if you think about factors of 4, you can realize that 200 is 200 factors into 4 and 50. So after this repeats 50 times, the 7 will be the 200th digit. Does that make sense? So this repeats, it's a chunk of 4, and on the 50th time this repeats, at the end of the chunk of 4 will be the 200th digit, which will be the number 7, which means that the 201st, 202nd, 203rd digit will be the same as the first, second, and third digit. So the 203rd is the same as the third digit, which is 3. So no math really at all here, just problem solving. A hose sprays water at a rate of 5 liters per minute into a bucket that leaks at a rate of 2 liters per minute after it has been filled to a level of 5 liters. How many minutes after the hose begins filling the bucket will the bucket contain 11 liters of water? So this is starting to get a little bit more difficult. 5 liters per minute, and then after 5 liters, the hose starts to leak at 2 liters per minute. So we can imagine that the way that this bucket fills is something like, all right, if we just need to figure out 11 liters, we know that 5 liters in the first minute, and then after that, it fills at 5 minus 2 liters per minute, which is 3 liters per minute. So we know that if we just think of a little table here, we have time and we have liters. And we know after 1 minute, we have 5 liters. After 2 minutes, we're going to have another 3 liters because it's leaking at 2 liters per minute. So we're going to have 8 liters. And at 3 minutes, we're going to have 11 liters. Right? Does that make sense? So after 3 minutes, we have 11 liters, which is what the question is asking for. So here we are, 3 minutes. The other way that you can solve this is to think of it as sort of a system of equations, or if you think of it as sort of a graph, where if we imagine 1, we can say that we have the line 5x, and then afterwards we have the line 3x. And we can sort of imagine 3x in slope-intercept form for everything greater than 1. So, so we can imagine that this is also the line 3x intersecting this point 1, 5. Intersecting this point 1, 5. I should label that. And we can think of this line in point slope form, which is going to be y minus the y value, which is 5, equals the slope 3 times the times x minus the x value is 1. And you can solve this for 11 liters. In other words, y equals 11 after time x, which is going to be 3, as we will see. So 11 minus 5 equals 3x minus 1. In other words, 6 equals 3x minus 3, and 9 equals 3x, or x equals, let me scroll down a little bit here, x equals 3. So you can solve it either way. This table form is fast, but obviously if you don't end up with an absolute number, with a whole number I should say, it's going to be a little bit slower. On the other hand, if this said 9, suppose this question said 9 liters of water, how many minutes does it take to get to 9 liters of water? Well, you would know that it's more than 2 and closer to 2 than 3, so you might say that it was B. Likewise, if it said 12 liters of water or 13 liters of water, you might say D. So, you know, this table form, you might say that it only gives you absolute answers, perfect answers for every minute, but you could also say that this is close enough to approximate on a multiple choice question. Question 33 asks, a bag contains balls of 5 possible colors: red, blue, yellow, green, and purple. In the bag, 2/3 of the balls are red. If the remaining balls have an even distribution of the remaining 4 colors, what is the probability that a ball randomly drawn from the bag is purple? So we know that 2/3 of the balls are red, which means that 1/3 is left for the other 4 colors. And those are evenly distributed. So the chance of any color, any of these remaining colors, is 1/3 divided by 4, because we have 4 colors into which this 1/3 is divided. And this is the same as 1/12. This is the chance of drawing a ball of any of these 4 colors, including purple. So the answer is 1/12. Question 34 asks for the range of the function f of x equals negative x plus 4 to the 4th minus 2. And if we want to start thinking about the range of this term, I think we're going to end up with something very interesting. So we know that any x to the 4th or x plus 4 to the 4th is always going to be positive, right? We know that's always going to be positive, and we know that's going to go to infinity. If we think of these even-numbered exponential functions, we think x squared and x to the 4th is something like that. Well, they'd intersect down here. We remember the shape is always positive, always positive. But it's negative. This is a negative thing, so this is going to be always negative. So the highest that this term can ever be is 0. Well, excuse me. Let's look at it this way. This is going to be negative, and this is going to extend, excuse me, all the way to negative infinity, all the way down. If we think of x being a very, very large number, then we can imagine this being super, super, super negative. So the lower limit of this is going to be negative infinity. So we can eliminate every answer choice that doesn't have negative infinity for the lower limit of this range. The upper limit of this function, the other end of the interval, is also going to be limited by this term. How high does this term go? Well, the highest that this can be, if it's always going to be negative, the highest this can be is 0. And the reason why the highest this can be is 0 is that x to the 4th is always going to be positive or 0. x plus 4 to the fourth is always going to be positive or 0. And if we make it negative, then it's always going to be negative or 0. So the highest this can be is 0. And 0 minus 2, which is never going to change, is going to be negative 2, which means the upper limit of this function, the other end of the range of this function, is going to be negative 2. So our answer choice is E. Question 35 asks, on a map, Springfield is 10 centimeters from Franklin and 8 centimeters from Greenville. If Springfield is 6 kilometers from Greenville, how far in kilometers is Springfield from Franklin? So if we think that the ratio is 8 centimeters, Springfield is 8 centimeters from Greenville, or 6 kilometers in real life. If we think that the ratio is 8 centimeters to 6 kilometers, then we need to find, for this ratio, how far in kilometers is Springfield from Franklin for 10 centimeters. For 10 centimeters. So, for another 2 centimeters, let's figure out what that extra 2 centimeters represents, right? Because it's 10 centimeters farther than, and 8 centimeters for that one. Anyway, let's figure out the difference here. 8 centimeters is 6 kilometers, 8 centimeters on the map, 6 kilometers in real life, which means that 2 centimeters is going to be 6 kilometers over 4. 6 over 4 kilometers, or 1.5 kilometers. 2 centimeters is going to be 1.5 kilometers. Which means that 10 centimeters is going to be 5 times 1.5 kilometers. So 10 centimeters is going to be 5 times 1.5 kilometers, or 7.5 kilometers. 7.5 kilometers is our answer. This is something that you could also do in your head. I would do this in my head. If you're fast and if you're good with mental math and you know that you're good with mental math, this is something that's very simple to say, okay, 8 to 6, 8 to 6 is 1.5 kilometers for 2 centimeters, and then I'll just add those 1.5 kilometers on top of 6 kilometers because it's 2 centimeters more on the map. That's something that you could do in your head if you really wanted to. You could also estimate, right? You know it's going to be more than that. 6 kilometers for 8 centimeters means that 10 centimeters on the map is going to be more than 6 kilometers. So you could say, okay, obviously not 4.5, probably more than 7, and probably not as many as 13.3. So you could, if you had to estimate, guess between 7.2 and 7.5. Question 36 asks for the perimeter of the rhombus ABCD, where AC equals 6 and BD equals 8. Yeah, this seems like a very difficult question, so I am going to skip it just for now. One number is 50% of a second number, and the second number is 35% of a third number. The first number is what percent of the third number? So the way that you solve this is very simple. If one number is 50% of a second number, then you could say, let's say, that A equals 0.5 B, and you could say B equals 0.35 C, right? 35% of C is 0.35C, and that's what B is. 0.5B is half of B, 50% of B, which is what A is. So here is what we have. So the first number is what percent of the third number? So in other words, let's express A in terms of C. Let's find an expression of C in terms of A. So the first thing we need to do is we need to express B in terms of A, and then we can find this equation. So 0.5b, let's just multiply 0.5 out and say 2a equals b. Then we can substitute this back in. I hope that I didn't move too fast. 2a equals b, we're multiplying by 2 to get the 0.5 out. We could also divide by 0.5, which would be the same thing. But let's substitute 2a in here. 2a equals 0.35c. Which means that, and we need to find the first number is what percent of the third number. So we need to say A equals 0.35C over 2, or A equals 0.175C. And the answer is 17.5%. The other thing that you could do is you could realize that what we're basically doing here is we're multiplying 50% times 35%. If you're going to do this in your head, you would realize, okay, 50% of something and then 35% of the next thing. You could realize that this is just the same as saying 0.5 times 0.35 equals 0.175. That would be a much faster way to do that, and if you can make that jump in your head, I highly recommend it. A wildlife refuge with the shape and dimensions given in miles pictured to the right has a deer population density of 8 deer per square mile. What is the total deer population of the refuge? Again, this seems difficult and I'm going to skip it. And it doesn't seem difficult, it seems like it will take a long time to add up all of these little spaces. Question 39 asks, a sales team's total earnings are composed, on average, of 60% base rate pay and 40% commissions. The team's December commissions earnings represent 15% of their total commissions earnings. What percent of the team's total earnings is their December commissions earnings? So this is the same basic question as the last one. We're asking 15% of 40%. Right? 15% of 40%. And then we're multiplying that back out to make a percentage. So we can just do in our calculator 0.4 times 0.15, which gets 0.06 or 6%. Question 40 asks, a rectangle with an area of 24 centimeters has a length and width in centimeters that are both integers. Which of the following cannot be the perimeter in centimeters of the rectangle? And let's just think for a minute about what you can do to make a rectangle with an area of 24 centimeters with a length and width that are both integers, which means that they're whole numbers, they're positive whole numbers in this case. So we can have 1 and 1 by 24, we can have 2 by 12, we can have 3 by 8, we can have 4 by 6, and all the way back down, 6 by 4, 8 by 3, etc. So which of the following cannot be the perimeter? So we know that it's 2 times the sum of whatever these numbers, because this is one side, this is the other side, and then we likewise have 2 more sides just like those previous 2. So one perimeter could be 50, right? 1 plus 24, all times 2 is 50. 2 plus 12 is 14, times 2 is 28, so this is fine. 3 plus 8 is 11, times 2 is 22, and 4 plus 6 is 10, times 2 is 20. So the one that cannot be a perimeter is 26. So this whole question, and 41 to 43, is tough. This is a lot. When you see these things, these boxes that say, you know, use the following to answer several questions, those are good to come back to later, I find. I'm going to skip over questions 41 to 43 and return to them later. So question 44. In the complex plane, consider the segment whose endpoints are the points corresponding to 4 minus 7i and minus 2 plus I. The midpoint of the segment corresponds to which of the following complex numbers? This is the same issue with vectors. You might not really have a sense of how to solve complex planes. This might be very difficult to visualize or impossible for many people. But what you need to realize is that you can just take an average. You don't really need to understand or think about what I means in this case. You just realize that it's just a different term. And you can take the averages of these. So the average of 4 and negative 2 is 1, and the average of negative 7i and I, halfway between them, is going to be, I believe, negative 3i. And that is answer choice C, 1 minus 3i. So you don't need to understand them. You don't need to know how to use complex numbers. You just need to know how to average these different like terms. How do you average 4 and negative 2? And how do you average negative 7 and 1? In the standard xy coordinate plane, the three lines with equations y equals x plus 3 and what is the area? Yeah, this looks really difficult. I'm going to skip question 45 as well and come back to it later. On the rectangle ABCD, which of the following quantities is rational? Length BC is irrational because it's the square root of 3, which is irrational. Line AD is exactly the same because it's a rectangle. Notice it's a rectangle. So line AD cannot be rational. It's the same thing exactly. These are equivalent answer choices, by the way. These are equivalent answer choices. The perimeter of rectangle ABCD cannot be at all. Oh, sorry, length dB. I skipped over length dB. Length dB is interesting, right? So if you think of this length across the rectangle is going to be, well, it's going to be 1 squared plus the square root of 3 squared, and it's going to be the square root of all of that. So it's going to be actually the square root of 4. So dB is going to be rational. The perimeter of the entire rectangle is going to be irrational because we're still adding the square root of 3 twice, and the area of the rectangle is going to be 1 times the square root of 3, so that is also not going to be rational. These look long. 47 looks long. I'm not even going to read it. 48 is one of these, again, these very long questions with several questions actually pertaining to one illustration that are all sort of related. So I'm going to skip it and come back to it later. And I'm going to proceed to question 52. Question 52 asks, a sequence is given by S1 equals 5 and S2 equals 6, and Sn plus 1 equals Sn plus Sn minus 1 for n is greater than 1 or equal to 1. What is S6? So this is a very complicated way of expressing a pretty simple concept, which is that we have this sequence, this series, a sequence I suppose, where we just need to add the two previous numbers. So we have 5, we have 6, which means our next number is 11. We have these two numbers and we have 17. We have these two numbers, we have 28. And we add these two numbers and we end up with 45. And that is our sixth term. Conveniently, these are also the terms that are our answer choices: 11, 17, 28, 45. And if we keep going, I'm sure that's 73. So a very complicated way of expressing this problem, but a very simple way of answering it. '53 is a trigonometry problem that asks, the triangle ABC has two legs, AB of length 10 and BC of length 13, with an angle of 100 degrees between them. What is the length of AC? Note that cosine of 100 is around minus 0.17, and sine of 100 degrees is around 0.98. So we have length BC, let's just label these, which is 13, and length AB, which is 10. So this is a problem that uses the law of cosines. So it looks complicated, but it's not really. If you know the law of cosines, that is. If you don't, skip it and don't even think about it. If you do know the law of cosines, then you know that the law states, let's start writing up here actually, a squared plus b squared minus 2ab cosine theta equals c squared. Okay, so pretty simple if we really think about it. We have 100 plus 169 minus 260 for 2ab, right? 13 times 10 is 130 times 2 is 260 times cosine of 100 is times minus 0.17 equals c squared. So it's calculator time. We have 269 minus this number, 260 times So if we plug all this into our calculator, which is what I recommend that we all do, we have 100 plus 169 minus 260 times negative 0.17 is c squared. In other words, c squared equals 313.2. Very, very roughly. So now we just need to find the second, we need to find the square root of 313. And the answer to the square root of 313.2 is 17.69, which I'm going to round to 18. Question 54 asks, which of the following expressions is equivalent to 2 minus 1 over a minus x minus 1 over a plus x? And what we need to realize here is that we have the factors of a difference of squares, right? If we multiply a minus x and a plus x, we get a squared minus ax plus ax minus x squared. So these cancel out and we get a squared minus x squared. So it's a difference of squares. And that's really the critical thing that we need to understand here. So we can multiply these numerators up this direction, and we can say a plus x over a squared minus x squared minus a minus x over a squared minus x squared. And we can say, okay, a plus x minus a minus x. So a minus a is going to be 0, and x minus negative x is going to be x squared over a squared minus x squared. And remember, we need to keep the 2 in there. 2 minus x squared over a squared minus x squared, which is answer choice B. Question 55 asks, one of the following equations is that of a parabola with x-intercepts minus 3 and 1/2 in the standard xy coordinate plane. Which equation? So we need to find the parabola with x-intercepts of minus 3.5, which means the zeros are minus 3.5. Or, in other words, the factors are going to be x plus 3, right? A 0 at minus 3, and x minus 1/2. These are our factors. We're going to find something that's a multiple of this, or maybe just this. So x squared, first, inner, plus 3x, plus the outer, minus 1/2 x minus 3 over 2. We're going to find some multiple of this. So first of all, it's not 1x. The lowest number we find here is 3x. So let's see about 3x, which would be, well, first of all, let's simplify this. X squared plus 5 over 2x minus 3 over 2. And it's also not going to be 3x squared plus 6x, because this would have to be 15 over 2, or 7.5x. So we can remove a. 4x squared plus 10x plus or minus 6 seems on the right track. 4x squared plus 20 over 2x, or 10x, okay, good, minus 12 over 2, or minus 6. So C is the correct answer. This is just one of those questions where it's really important to connect with what it means to be an x-intercept. What are we saying when we say something is an x-intercept? We're saying that that is going to figure into our factors for our polynomial expression. Question 56 asks, the ellipse depicted below has a center, 0, 1, major axis of length 4, major axis here of length 4, and a minor axis of length 2, this axis length 2. What is the equation of the ellipse? So we know that the equation of an ellipse is going to be x minus h squared over a squared, all of that, plus y minus k squared over b squared. And all of this equals 1. So it's just this weird way to modify the equation of a circle by a lot of different ways, if you want to think about it that way. So okay, so what is the difference if we want to say x minus h squared x? What is h? H in this case is the displacement along the x-axis, which in this case is nothing. The x-coordinate of the center is 0. So we actually have x squared over the length of the minor axis, which in this case is, the major axis, which in this case is 2, this distance, x squared over 2 squared, plus y minus the displacement on the y-axis, which is 1 minus 1, all squared, over the length of this axis, which is 1 squared, all equaling 1. So we can see we have x squared over 4, x squared over 4 plus y minus 1 squared over 1 equals 1, which is answer choice E. So now we're leading into this more problem-solving type problems. These aren't as much about your math skill, and these tend to be more about your ability to solve problems with solutions that you already know, but apply them to an interesting set of circumstances. 57 asks, what is the product of 1 over a squared times a squared over b squared times b squared over c squared times c squared over a? And this is exactly one of those questions. You might say that what we end up with is, 1 times a squared times, a squared, b squared, c squared over a squared, b squared, c squared, a. So it's very, very simple. You can just cross out like terms, divide by a squared, divide by b squared, divide by c squared, and the answer is 1 over, let's write that like a letter, 1 over a, which is the answer choice. And if you go through this and try to multiply these out as individual terms, you will get stuck. Right? If you see these as separately, instead of multiplying numerators and denominators straight across and simplifying, you will get stuck. And that's the point of a lot of these questions, is you will get stuck if you just try to solve them in a very straightforward way. You need to understand what they're really getting at and what the trick is. And for that reason, some of these questions won't be worth doing on your first pass through. I'm going to continue on with these and go back to the ones that we skipped, but some of these might be worth skipping. Some of these, number 55, 56, 57, might really be difficult and could take a ton of your time. So I'm just going to go through these really quickly, but keep in mind that if you have difficulty with these, then they might be worth ignoring altogether. And the same holds for this question. 58, if 3 to the a equals 11 and 3 to the b equals 33, then b minus a equals what? This is a little bit more difficult to express by writing it out, but what you know is that when we multiply something, when we use an exponent, we're saying how many times are we multiplying something by itself. We're asking, in other words, how do we raise this to the right exponent to produce a given number? And in the case of 3 to the a equals 11, we're saying, okay, 3 multiplied by itself some number of times equals 11. And in the case of 3 to the power of b equals 33, we're saying 3 multiplied by itself b times equals 33. And you'll notice these are not even close to squares, cubes, 3 to the fourth. We're multiplying 3 times itself an abnormal number of times, not a whole number of times. But the thing that we're supposed to notice here with this problem is that 11 and 33, 11 times 3 is 33. So we know that b, whatever it is going to be 1 more than a. So b minus a is going to equal 1. We could also express this in terms of logarithms. We could say, log base 3 of 3 to the a equals log base 3 of 11. And then we could say log base 3 of 3 to the a is a equals log 3 of 11. And then we could do the same thing for b and say that b equals log base 3 of 33 and solve it that way if we're really happy with our logarithms. And furthermore, if we got to this point, what I would do honestly is plug it into your calculator, be familiar with your calculator, of course, and know your logarithm rules, and just plug it in and it'll come up with a number that's very close to 1 if we take the difference between these two numbers. Right, so one way to do that is to get on your calculator and to say, okay, log base, your calculator probably doesn't have variable logarithm bases, but you could just say log base 10 of 11 divided by log base 10 of 3 to get the one number, which is 2.1826 on my calculator, and then say log base 10 of 33 over log base 10 of 3, and I end up with 3.186. So, okay, if you know your logarithm rules, you can work through this and figure out that these are right about 1 apart, or exactly 1 apart. But again, these are way, way more problem-solvy than math-based. And, math becomes more problem-solving as you progress, but these are going to be way more about your ability to address a complex problem using high school math than it is about necessarily applying that high school math in the abstract. Question 59 is the same thing, although it uses pre-algebra, really, skills that are just applied in a way that is quite complicated. The table below indicates the cover type, hardcover or paperback, and genre, fiction or nonfiction, of 300 books in Hibiki's collection. Suppose that 2 books of the 300 will be chosen at random to donate. Which of the following gives the probability that both books will be of the same genre and cover type? And what we need to realize here is that there are 4 outcomes that we like, and we need to add the probabilities of the 4 outcomes. So of course there are 300 squared total outcomes, but, well, basically, and we need to add the probabilities of each of the 4 outcomes that we like. In other words, if we draw fiction and hardcover first, what's the probability of drawing fiction and hardcover the second time? If we draw nonfiction hardcover first, what is nonfiction hardcover the second time? What's the probability of nonfiction hardcover twice? So we need to realize for each of these numbers divided into fiction, nonfiction, hardcover, and paperback, we need to take the chance of drawing that the first time divided by the total number of books, and then multiply that by the probability of drawing that the second time divided by the total number of books. So this means that we're going to say 102, starting with fiction hardcover, 102 divided by 300 times the probability that this happens the second time. Now that we've gotten rid of one of these, it's 101, and we've gotten rid of one total book, so it's 299, and this is our chance of fiction hardcover twice. But we need to realize that we're not just asking about fiction and hardcover, we're asking about the probability that you draw the same type of book twice out of any of these 4 types of book. Which means that this is actually only one small part of it. We also need to do the same thing for paperback fiction and hardcover nonfiction and paperback nonfiction. And what we notice is that this is answer choice A. We can't just finish with answer choice C. Answer choice C might be tempting based on what I just said, but this is just the probability of drawing fiction hardcover twice. We need to do that combined with the probabilities of drawing any of the 4 twice. And finally, 60 actually is one of the easier questions in this last section. A car dealership has 135 cars, 42 of which are electric. Of the electric cars, 27 are sedans, and of the non-electric cars, 40 are not sedans. The car dealership will give away 1 car at random as a promotion. What is the probability that the car is a sedan? Okay, so we have 135 cars and 42 are electric. This is just a tedious problem, but let's get through this. Let's see. So we have electric, and we have non-electric, we have sedans, and we have non-sedans. 42 cars, let's also have totals. 42 of them are electric. Of the electric cars, 27 are sedans. Of the non-electric cars, 40 are non-sedans. So let's keep in mind that we have, we're also trying to figure out the total number of sedans. So we have 135 total cars, which means 135 minus 42 is 93, I believe. 93 non-electric cars. 93 non-electric cars, which means 93 minus 40, 53 non-electric sedans. And if we have 53 non-electric sedans, We're asking the probability that the car is a sedan out of any of the cars. So our total number of sedans is 80. 80 sedans. Right? 27 plus 53 is 80. So 80 sedans out of a total of 135 cars is the probability that we draw a sedan, that we select a sedan out of all of the total possible cars. So answer choice E is 80 out of 135. Now let's go back and do the questions that looked difficult on the first pass through, starting with question number 17. Pencils are for sale for $D each, including tax. Svetlana has N dollars with which to purchase the pencils. After she purchases the maximum number she can, A pencils, she has B dollars left. For all possible choices of D and N, which of the following equations models the correct relationship between D, N, A, and B defined? So it looks like all of these equations find a solution for N. So that's what we need to do. Svetlana has N dollars with which to purchase the pencils. The maximum number of pencils is A pencils. She has B dollars left. So N is her total dollars. So A pencils will cost A times the price of the pencils, which is D. So A times D. N is the total dollars she has, which is going to equal the total number of dollars that she spends on pencils plus whatever is left. And the total number of dollars of pencils that she has is A, the number of pencils that she can buy, times D, the price of those pencils. So A times D plus whatever she has left. She has B dollars left, so AD plus B, which is answer choice B. So this is pretty simple, right? Svetlana has N dollars, and then she buys as many pencils as she can, which is some number of pencils times the price of those pencils, and then she has B dollars left, right? Pretty simple, pretty simple. At a cafe, customers can order either caffeinated or decaffeinated coffee, either with or without cream. Out of a total of 100 customers, 32 ordered decaffeinated coffee and 14 ordered decaffeinated coffee with cream. Without cream. 62 customers ordered coffee with cream. The given information is summarized in the table below. How many customers ordered caffeinated coffee with cream? In other words, we're trying to find this value. And to do this, we need to find this value, right? So that we know how these add up to 62. So decaffeinated with cream is going to be the total of the decaffeinated minus the decaffeinated without cream. 32 minus 14, in other words, which is 18. Which is 18, right? 18 plus 14 is 32. Yes, that's right. 18. 62 minus 18 is going to be our caffeinated coffee with cream. The total number of customers that buy caffeinated coffee with cream. And 62 minus 18 is 44, right? 44, we can just quickly add these up. 44, 12. Yes, indeed is 62. So we have 44 customers that order caffeinated coffee with cream. Let's move on to question 29, which is one of our other very difficult questions. that seemed time-consuming on the first pass. For one working week, Mike recorded the following temperatures in degrees Celsius so he could investigate the difference between the high and low temperature each day. To the nearest degree, what is the mean of the positive differences in daily high and low temperatures for these 5 days? So this is going to be pretty simple. We need to find the positive difference in the high and low temperatures and then take the means of those. So a lot of arithmetic, but it should be pretty simple. So the positive difference for Monday is 8 degrees. Positive difference for Tuesday is 7. Positive difference here, again, 7 for Wednesday, 9 for Thursday, and 12. My goodness, some handwriting I have. And 12 for Friday. Hello? Fantastic. 1 minute. So what we need to do here is we need to find the mean of these. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to punch them into my calculator. 8 plus 7 plus 7 plus 9 plus 12, and divide it by 5 days, which is 8.6. And to the nearest degree, that is 9 degrees. The nearest degree is 9. So a very simple problem. You got to make sure that you round right. Don't round down, of course, but a very simple problem nonetheless. And maybe I did not estimate it quite perfectly the first pass through. That would have been pretty easy to do. So moving on to question 36, which asks, what is the perimeter of rhombus ABCD pictured below, where AC equals 6 and BD equals 8? So in other words, AC equals 6 and BD equals 8. Well, this is really asking us to find the hypotenuse of this triangle, And what we'll notice is that AC is going to be 3. Well, sorry, AC is 6, but half of it is 3 because it's a rhombus. And we can take half of it to find this. And BD equals 8, and half of that is 4. So if we know that this is a 3, 4, 5 right triangle, we know that this is 5, and likewise this is 5, and this is 5, and this is 5. So the perimeter is going to be 20 for all 4 sides. So question 38 I skipped because it has a lot of steps, but it shouldn't be that difficult. As I look at this, I think that there are a lot of little things that I could get wrong, and I just don't want to miss any of those in a time crunch. So I want to make sure that I have enough time to do this, which is why I left it toward the end. But okay, a wildlife refuge with the shape and dimensions pictured to the right has a deer population density of 8 deer per square mile. What is the total deer population of the refuge? So let's just break this shape down into its components. So here we have 80 times 40, 80 times 40 square miles, which is 3,200 square miles. In each of these, we have the same size, 16 by 20 triangles. And if we add 16 by 20 triangles to each other, we get a total area of 320. Because again, half of 16 times 20 plus half of 16 times 20 equals 16 times 20. So these are going to equal 320. And this is going to equal 20 times whatever this base is. And these legs are 16 miles, which means that this base is going to be 48 miles. Right? 16 plus 16 is 32, 80 for the total length of this, and 80 minus 32 is 48. So we have 48 times 20, or 960. Add them all together, 320 plus 960 plus 3200, and we end up with 4480. And look, this is an answer choice, but be careful. But be really, really, really careful, because the answer is not 4480, because we have 8 deer per square mile. And here's how many square miles of wildlife refuge we have, but we actually need to multiply this all by 8, which is 35,840, which is answer choice C. So be careful, do all of the steps. You have to make sure that you do all of the steps on this sort of problem. Okay, let's move on to question 45. No, the other way. Because that one was one that seemed like it was going to be very difficult and involved. This one is probably more problem solving as well. But okay, in the standard xy coordinate plane, the three lines with equations y equals x plus 3, y equals 1/2 x plus 3, and y equals 0 bound a triangular region. What is the area in square coordinate units of that triangular region? So okay, let's imagine this. X plus 3, y equals x plus 3. So that means our intercept, our y-intercept is here, and it's x. So the slope is going to be 1, which should be easy enough to draw. I'm trying to get this all right. Y equals minus 1/2 x plus 3. Okay, so it's, again, on this same intercept, but minus 1/2 x. So going over two coordinate units for every time it goes down, and y equals 0, which is this line. So here's our triangle. Here is our triangle, and we can see we have a height of 3, and we have a base of 3, 6, 9. So the area is going to be 9 times 3 divided by 2. 9 times 3 is 27, divided by 2 is 13.5. And we can solve this without using the graph. We can double check to make sure that our drawing skills are up to snuff. We can say, okay, what is the, what's the x-intercept of, what is the x-intercept of some of these, right? When y equals 0, what do these equations equal? So if 0 equals x plus 3, then x equals minus 3, right? Y equals x plus 3, 0 equals x plus 3, then x is going to equal negative 3, which is what we see right here. And if 0 equals minus 1/2 x plus 3, then minus 3 is going to equal minus 1/2 x, and x is going to equal 6, which is what we see over here. So there's a base of 9, minus 3 to 6, and our height of 3 we can be confident in, because we know that, well, we know slope-intercept form, I guess. We can be confident that this is going to be 3. So let's move on to questions 41 through 43, which was this very difficult, well, maybe not difficult, but very involved set of questions, which has some information presented in front of it, right? This is one of the few times in the math section when you do have multiple questions having to do with each other. Ken is deciding between 2 cars to purchase. Some information about each car is given below. Use the information to answer questions 41 through 43. Okay, so first we're asked, what is the positive difference in dollars of the 2 list prices? And we can see that the positive difference is $6,000. But these are listed in scientific notation. And we can know that if it's $6,000, it's going to be 6 times something, times 10 to something. But if we think about the number of times that the decimal point is going to jump to make 6,000, we have 1, 2, 3 jumps that it makes, which means 6 times 10 to the third power, $6,000, which is answer choice D. Ken will consider the fuel cost per mile driven of each car. Let X and Y, this is a typo, let X and Y be the fuel cost per mile driven, rounded to the nearest hundredth of a dollar, of car A and car B, respectively. Which one of the following comparisons is true? Which one? Okay, let X and Y be the fuel cost per mile driven, rounded to the nearest hundredth of a dollar, of car A and car B. So X is car A, fuel cost per mile driven, X. And we need to figure out fuel cost per mile driven of car B. Well, we know that the fuel efficiency of car A is 24. So we need to figure out what the fuel cost per mile driven of a car that makes 32 miles per gallon is. So if the fuel cost per mile driven is 13 cents and a gallon of gas, of fuel I should say, because that's how it's written, is going to be 24 times 13 cents. Then we can simply divide that by 32. So 1 gallon, so 24, times 0.13. Means that fuel here costs $3.12 in this thing. So fuel costs $3.12. And we can divide that by 32, which gives us a fuel cost per mile driven of $0.0975. So now we can answer to the nearest hundredth of a dollar, or to the nearest cent, of car A and B respectively, which of the following comparisons is true. So we know it's not equal, and we know it's not 0.6 of anything, 0.06 I should say, but it's 3 cents. So X and Y, X is for car A and Y is for car B. So we know that X is 3 cents greater than Y, which is answer choice B right here. 43, the last question in this little chunk. The annual insurance cost of car A is 6% of its manufacturer's suggested retail price, MSRP. What is car A's MSRP? So, we're now learning that the list price is different from the MSRP. That's interesting. But anyway, the annual insurance cost is $1,500. So we can say MSRP is going to equal 0.06 times 1,500. And we can just divide 1,500 by 0.06 to do this. MSRP times 0.06 equals 1,500. We can just divide this by 0.06. Or excuse me, Question 43 asks, the annual insurance cost of car A is 6% of its manufacturer's suggested retail price, MSRP. What is car A's MSRP? And for this, we need to know what the insurance cost of car A is, which is $1,500. So 6% of its MSRP, in other words, MSRP times 0.06 equals $1,500. So this is easy. We can just divide both sides by 0.06, using our calculators especially, to find that MSRP is going to equal 1,500 divided by 0.06, or 25,000, which is answer choice C. And finally, we have questions 48 through 51. This is one that seems to be quite difficult. Firstly, on the coordinate plane, graph of the line y equals x intersects with the circle of radius r at points C and D shown below. What is the y-coordinate of point D? Well, we know that we have the line y equals x. And so the y-coordinate of point D is going to be where, because it intersects with this circle, it's going to be the same as the x-coordinate. And the x-coordinate, well, I should say not the x-coordinate, the total length of this is going to be r. The total length from the origin to D is going to equal r. Which means that we have, in fact, we have a right triangle, actually an isosceles triangle with two legs of the same length. So we have r squared equals a squared plus b squared. In this case are going to be the same thing. So we have 2x squared, right? The x and y coordinates are going to be the same, and we'll use x for the x coordinate. So if r squared equals 2x squared, now we just need to simplify for x. So we suppose that r squared over 2 is going to equal x squared. Now we just take the square root of both sides and find that x equals r over the square root of 2. This is the square root of a fraction. If we multiply this by itself, r squared for the numerator and 2 for the denominator. So r, my r's look very much like my square root signs, r over the square root of 2, which is answer choice A. Question 49 asks, suppose another circle of radius 2r with a center at 0, minus 2r is drawn on the plane. How many points of intersection do the circles have? 0, 1, 2, 4, or infinite? So we have another circle at 0, minus 2r with a radius of 2r. Which means if the center of the circle is somewhere over here, suppose, minus 2r and 0, and the radius is 2r, if the x-coordinate of the center of the circle is minus 2r and the radius is 2r, then this circle is going to look a little something like this. It's going to look a little something like this. And it is going to intersect with this circle at 2 points. This is just something that helps to graph. But if you imagine also these other answer choices, 0 points of intersection means that the circles don't touch at all. And in this case, it's impossible for the circles not to touch at all, because you know that this circle goes through the origin and out again and way past the boundaries of the other circle. right? You just know that there is some overlap between these circles. Even if you don't draw it, you just know this. So 0 isn't possible. 0 would be the case if this other circle were 5r or 6r away. Fine, 0 points of intersection, but it's not. 1 point of intersection would mean that the circles touch exactly once. There would be 1 point of intersection if our new circle had the same radius, had radius r, and had a center at minus 2r. But we know that they touch at more than one circle, again, because we know that this circle goes straight through the origin. Four points of intersection is impossible. If you think about how two circles could lay on top of each other, you can have 1, 2, or infinite points of intersection. You could not have 4 points of intersection among two circles. And infinite would mean that they're the same circle. Infinite would mean that they're the same circle. And they're obviously not the same circle because they have different centers and they have different radii. So these are not the same circle. So infinite also can't be there. So I didn't prove this mathematically at all. I think it's worth noting that I just sort of imagined and drew out what this circle would look like. And, you could prove this mathematically, but it would take you way more time, right? You could definitely find the equation of this circle and find all of the points of intersection and find where this equation, and also find the equation of this circle and find where the two equations equal each other and see how many points there are. And you would definitely come to the right answer doing that, but it would just take so much more of your time than you really have. Remember, you have 1 minute per question, and you're never going to answer all of the questions if you take enough time to solve this with absolute precision and by proving it algebraically. So now we need to know, what is the area inside the circle below the line y equals x? Well, we know that this circle, this line y equals x, goes through the origin. Right? And we know, this is not provided that it goes through the origin explicitly, but we know that if it intersects with point 0r, then it is going through the origin because the circle wouldn't extend that far. So we know that the line y equals x is dividing the circle in half. Right, it's going through the origin, it's dividing the circle perfectly in half. And this should be fairly intuitive to most people, but it's worth bringing up. So we know that the area of the circle is pi r squared. In this case, the radius is in fact r. Pi r squared is the area of the circle. We divide the whole thing by 2, though, because the line y equals x is dividing it by 2, and we get this area, pi r squared over 2, which is answer choice A. Suppose that r equals 5. What is the equation of the circle? And so we can immediately, if we know our circles, a circle at the radius is x squared minus y squared equals r squared. Equals r squared. Which means that our equation is x squared minus y squared equals 25, which is this answer choice. So that just about wraps up the section. I hope this helps. I really do. I hope that this has given you some insight, both into the strategy of how to approach these types of sections, and also into how to solve some of these specific problems. How, even on a problem-by-problem basis, we're still using test-taking techniques for a lot of these answers. When you think about choices like question 49, we realize that this is a math test, but this is not just about your math. This is also about your ability to understand what's asked and to narrow down from 5 answer choices to 1 You don't need to prove your answers. You don't need to show your work in anything. You just need to fill in the right bubble. And I hope that I've shown you how you can do that a little bit faster. Anyway, I hope this helps. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to check out my website at greataspirationsprep.org for more worksheets like this one and full practice sections on all of the subjects of the ACT, as well as my channel for more walkthroughs like this one and tutorial videos. I wish you all the best of luck. Thank you so much. Take care.